Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the Ashwaubenon Finance and Personnel Committee for Tuesday, December 19th to order. Roll call, please.
Mark Williams.
Here.
Chris Serval.
Here.
Mike Malczewski.
Here.
John Duska.
Present.
And Tom Selk.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there any corrections or additions to the agenda?
I have none.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 5, action on minutes from October 17th and November 7th. Finance and Personnel Committee regular meeting on October 17th and the Joint Village Board and Finance and Personnel minutes from November 7th, 2017. Motion to approve them?
So moved.
We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 6, comments from the public. Is there anybody here this evening that'd like to speak to anything that's not on the agenda? Not on the agenda. Okay, we'll move on to number 7, action items. A, action on proposed weights and measures fee schedules.
Just try to keep this brief. We contract our weights and measure services with the City of Appleton. City of Appleton, we've been doing that for a long time. They contract with a number of different communities. It helps bring the cost down for everybody. The way they work is they have a schedule of fees, and that is attached here for all the different services they provide. And what we're looking to do is just adjust one of those fee items. It's the petroleum pump fee that we currently charge $18, and they want to increase that $2 up to $20. The average for all of the cities that they work with is actually $34, so it's still significantly under, but it works for what we do and the services that they provide. Basically, we meet with them every year. They go through, they have a variety of our process they use to go through the village and check all the weights and measure needs, but then they also review our fee structure to make sure we're in line and make adjustments or make recommendations accordingly. So this is an adjustment that they recommend for us to make on our schedule.
Is this a break even for us?
Yes, it's a break-even service. They can't make money on it, and we can't make money on it. So.
Yep.
Just curious, does the city of Green Bay do this, and wouldn't they be a more logical choice, or?
The City of Green Bay does. I believe they only, I'm not sure if they do any other communities. They have their own service. This has just worked well. And I didn't look up the history. I know it's been, boy, it seems like it's been 20 plus years that we've worked with Appleton. It's just, it just works well. So there hasn't been a reason or a need to do it differently. It's certainly something we could consider in the future, but yes, Green Bay has its own service. I'm not even sure that they're willing or have the time and ability to do other communities. I'd have to look into all that.
I'm just curious.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second it.
We got a motion and a second to approve the action on proposed weights and measure fee schedules. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 7B, action on 2017 excess general fund dollars. Greg, I guess.
Yes, we brought this up in October, I believe, actually, and then it was discussed at the budget time that we were anticipating that we would have excess dollars in the general fund at the end of the year. And I mentioned that what we want to do is, at least at a bare minimum, set it aside through committee, then board action, ultimately village board action, so that it's not just rolled into the general fund balance. We want to sign it for something. I think what we still want to do is think about, consider different options. We talked about it briefly at the joint meeting for the budget as well. Some of those areas that we would have, could be used for future debt service need, could be used for future capital projects, could be used to replenish a few different funds. So we wanted to start this conversation, but I think for right now, the key is that we at least assign it, and at bare minimum for future capital needs. It'll be reserved on our books. When the auditors look at that, it'll be reserved, and then at any point during the year, we can revisit this. It doesn't even have to be in 18, but it could be if we think there's a big project coming down the road. There were a lot of different ideas expressed at different points in time, so if you want to have that discussion now, certainly that's up to you. But at least I want to make sure before the year ends, we have to have a formal board action to assign these funds.
Well, personally, I think that what future capital needs probably gives us the most flexibility instead of signing it right off the bat. I'm not so inclined right now to assign Clipstein remediation settlement dollars for employee retirement fund or village fund. I don't have a problem with using the other funds for that purpose or something, but I have a problem. I would rather see it for debt reduction from the remediation or something like that, but right now, I think this just my opinion now, I would rather see it just earmarked for future capital needs, I guess.
And that's fine, just so you're aware, the language by assigning the funds, just because you say capital needs, the board can change that down the road and say, okay, we said capital, but we want to change our position and we want to use it for X purpose now. You can do that. It's just assigning it to something now. It's just the motion of assigning it is the key. So what you say today, you can change, the board can change that action down the road as well, just so you're aware.
The retirement fund that you have in your document, is that actually the pension retirement, or is that fund that is used to pay unused vacation sick leave?
Correct. We have no official OPEB benefits for employees. We do not provide, we don't provide insurance after retirement, things like that, where we pay the premiums. We don't pay any retirements out. Everyone here has, through the Wisconsin retirement system, we pay in as an employee is in. But once
Right.
they retire, they just deal with the state for their retirement. So yes, this is just accumulated sick leave, accumulated comp time, things like that, that when an employee retires, it's paid out at that moment that they retire.
Okay.
So what should that fund be? I mean, you said you only got a year's worth of,
Well, ultimately,
cover 1 year's of retirement. I mean, as next year you're gonna need the same amount or more, or?
it depends on the employee. Quite frankly, there's a set of employees that have a little bit higher, typically have a higher payout. Right now, I don't know that we know of any employees that are planning to retire next year, but typically somebody does. Somebody, one or two typically do. So if they don't, then it just comes out of the general fund. It's money that's owed, so we can't not pay it out. So it would just become, if in years past, we didn't have a fund. I think we started the fund when we closed TIF 2. So that was in 2008. In prior years, we just absorbed that in the budget. It wasn't, and I started in 06, the question was like, well, don't we want to assign some dollars somehow, some way? Well, it was really hard to add that kind of money into the budget. So we just kind of wrote variances to cover as people retired. So that's why we created the fund at the time, so that we didn't have to, gamble that we would have money available if people were retiring. That fund has dwindled down over time, and it's just at a point where either we talked about this, Allison, Mary, and I talked about this during the budget, that at some point we probably want to consider allocating some tax dollars in a year. We can't always rely on these excess funds to be available. If costs come in how we think they're going to come in, we won't have additional funds like that. So it's something we will probably have to address in next year's budget for 2019, that we should at least consider putting something in there.
But there's nothing in this year's budget for retirement fund?
do we choose not to?
You can. It's not normal in a like situation with government. In private business, you would see a lot more accruals running that way. And
Yeah.
if you had what would be deemed post-retirement benefits, because you have to plan more. This is just payouts that, you know, an employee today could have a large balance, but then they could potentially use it all during the year and eat into it, or what we're talking is just kind of going on trends. We typically, that's how I would do it. We typically see X number of employees at this dollars. We should make sure that we're funding this accordingly. And that would be the accrual basis, if you will. But we don't have any, it's not like an employee leaves and then there's, you know, a 10-year schedule that we'd have to follow. It's a one-time payment out, and then that's it. So you can have a year where nobody retires, or they could be of age to retire but choose not to. So there's,
Okay.
and people aren't just forthcoming saying, yes, I'm going to retire in 3 years. And
So what are some of the average payouts on some of that stuff? I mean, if you don't just put $10,000 in there, I mean, is it $100,000? Is it?
we've had some 90,000s. We've had 2,000. The average, probably somewhere in, it's just hard because it's such a gap between different employee types. One employee type, your average is probably around 70, 75, and the rest of the employees are typically around 20, something like that, maybe 15, 20, 25.
It'll also change going into the future. Right now, public safety officers will bank 480 hours in their comp bank and then save that for a payout later. But I think just more of a trend in terms of if we look at what our younger officers are, there are very few of them that are really pushing that comp bank to the max. It's just a change in lifestyle, a change of what they're doing. The change in how we calculated FALSA all kind of plays into that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolution comes, but there's very few that would really, you know, early on, if you looked 15 years ago and looked at how many officers were probably banked all the way up to 480, it was probably all of them. Now, if we look at it, it's not that. So, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to bank it in the last 10 years they're here or something like that too. So, but they are administrative employees. A lot of them don't have they won't have, none of them actually, in terms of administrative or public works, we pay out their comp balances at the end of every year. So they are not accruing that from year to year. And then they have to max out their sick leave accruals in order to get a fairly substantial payout, but even that's just not going to reach the same levels. Their pay scale is lower. Their bank overall is a slightly lower number.
What would happen if two employees retired and they both get a $75,000 payout and you only got $100,000 in the fund? Where would the money come from?
Just general fund is always the default fund. So it would come out of the general fund.
So just
Okay.
like this, we're doing a resolution on what to do with excess funds. Those generally have existed in some fashion or format, and then it gets pulled out of that and just depletes what you have left at the end of the year.
Right. For example, had we not had a retirement fund this year, the 100,000 in general operations excess wouldn't exist because it would have gone towards one of the retirements.
So how much is in that account right now?
We're looking right now. I thought I had it on there. Fund balance at the end of this year will be about $103,000. So that should be fine, based on what I think I know for retirements or potential retirements. That should be fine through 2018. But like I said, there's
A couple things that are giving me pause here, I guess. One is that, and something you said before is that, you know, if we put it all in whatever fund we wanted to, or in capital needs funds, that the village board at any time could do whatever they want with it. Well, that's, I would rather see it assigned right now than and then have them assign it down the road. So I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to spending the assigning 240, making a recommendation to village board to put $240,000 into the employee retirement fund and $1.8 million into future capital needs. I guess, I mean, if we wanted to do something like that.
Yeah, no, the list I put on there are just things that were kind of discussed or talked about at
Sure.
varying levels. Nothing has been committed. You know, the building fund, we did in the budget process start putting some funding back into that one. And the street construction fund, we have over the last 2 years added significant amount of tax dollars into that fund. So those we've kind of been able to cover. And the goal is to try to get the retirement fund being the same way, but it would be nice to have a one-time influx to.
So how many years,
Yeah.
how many years do we have on our debt on Clipstein Park?
We discussed that. We can't do anything. That we got in that discussion with Ephesus and all that. I don't know if we want to get into that again. It's not callable until, it's a 10-year debt, so it wouldn't be callable till like 2023, somewhere in there, 2024. So
Okay, I'm just taking it as an example. Say that we take, and I'm going to take it another step further. If we said $240,000 to the employee retirement fund, and we put $800,000 into debt reduction for remediation costs, then we don't have to take that $100,000 out of our general fund all the time. We go back to that account and take it out of there and pay the $100,000 out of there a year. So we don't have to tax for it on an annual basis. Does that work?
it's an option. I think we had this similar discussion, and I think out of all the discussion points, the one, right, our debt schedule is nice and level, so if we use it to cut away at 1 year of something, then the next year it's going to be back up, so we would have to find that funding.
I'm just saying use $100,000 a year for 8 years or whatever, if it's 8 years that's left on it. We use that money instead of using it, using whatever is up and above beyond that, then we have to make a tax for that, or create. It's just easing the tax burden every year is what we're doing.
And I think that's one good way. The other way was, I think what Baird had recommended too, was look at your next debt service need, because if you need to borrow $1 million, that's really $1.2 million in total cost. So you'd be gaining an additional $200,000 by doing something. That similar concept, you're using it for debt service, but you're just, instead of paying something existing, you're addressing a future need and lowering that debt commitment need, which will probably be at a higher interest rate anyway, because all of our debt right now is pretty low rates.
Well, the articles that were written in the papers and stuff like that, I've got quite a few different people responding, well, what are you guys going to do with it? And if the village board at any time can do whatever they want with it, I would rather see it assigned now than reassigned later, because they all, there's a lot of them that said that they would rather see it used for what it was intended for, or what we got the payment for. And I'm at least giving a portion of it, that debt reduction for remediation, and then you still have $1 million left over for capital improvements, and it still could be used for something else too.
There's not really a viable way to stick it exactly back into that, because the debt's not callable. So you would have to use it for something else, no matter what it is. And the point from Baird is, if you take that money and pay it down, it's worth less than if you were using it to pay a future debt. In
So what do you
addition,
pay-
your debt service
I understand what you're saying,
is a
Allison, but
different taxing.
what are you paying, what are we paying the payments on it right now? How are we coming up with that money?
Those
So
are
we have our whole debt schedule, our whole debt service schedule out there, and that's really the first portion of the total tax allocation goes to cover debt. First thing we do is, okay, how much debt do we owe? All right, we put of the $12.6 million in tax levy, this is what we're putting, first goes to pay off debt. Then we look at our operations.
So if you put $800,000 in this account, why can't you take $100,000 out of it a year to put towards that debt reduction?
Right, which then frees up $100,000 of the levy to use for other purposes. Yep.
Right.
But it goes to your total levy, as opposed to our increase of what we can do from an operational standpoint is subject to the levy limit, whereas opposed to the debt portion is not. And now you're taking something from the debt side and trying to place it on the other side, and you will likely end up in some sort of predicament in the future, because you can't necessarily swap those. They're
Right.
calculated, they're levy limits on there. We can only increase our tax rate by what the difference of our growth and our
construction.
net new construction. And the debt, that goes up whatever you decide to borrow. That's a different category. So you don't have those same limits on there. So you would maybe work in one year, but at some point you're going to be in a pinch, and how are you going to switch those back and forth? They're not that flexible.
Yeah, there's ways, I don't want to say, the way that the levy limit rules are, you're allowed to increase your levy for debt purpose needs. But if it's not for debt purpose needs, then you're restricted to the levy limit laws of net new construction and those caps.
Yeah.
So we've been able to keep our levy where it's at because we have a pretty steady flow of debt service needs. So it's an in and out every year and the whole calculation. I don't want to get into that, but I think that's why Baird made the recommendation to say, leave your existing debt schedule alone and just apply it to the next one, because I get what you're saying. You free up money in the future, and you've just increased your buying power by 20%, because $1 million issue, I'm just using it as an example, typically costs about $1.2 million in total debt service. So now you've saved yourself $200,000. So essentially you're able to spend $1.2 million with $1 million. I think that's why they recommended the way they did. But I understand what you're saying and how you want to approach it that way, because you're tying it. You can, although we can't say that it's for that particular debt, the Klitzstein debt, we can say it's for just debt service repayment.
Oh, okay, so everybody up here heard the conversations. I don't know, I want to get some opinions up here first before we,
Well, it sounded like Greg said, I'm not going to try to quote it, but pretty close, that regardless of where you assign it, this board or any future board can reassign it whenever it wants to. The only time that you can't reassign the money is if you've spent it. I mean, once it's out the door, that's the only time you can't shift it around. So I guess in terms of making an assignment, other sending out an intent, nothing is guaranteed it's going to work that way.
right.
So I don't know. I mean, if you want to make an assignment with here's our current thinking, here's what we need to do, that's all well and good, knowing that until it's spent, that money can get shifted around.
I'll throw this out for consideration. What if we put $250,000 in the building fund, $240,000 in the retirement fund, reserve the rest for future capital development? Does that still give us the ability to move from building fund or retirement fund as needed, if needed?
Yes,
Yeah,
the board
it does.
could, once it's in any of those funds, the board could reposition the cash at that point if they wanted to, yes.
Okay. Because I'd like to see money in the building fund and the retirement fund, and the rest go to future capital.
So do we have debt reduction in our budget this year?
No, we actually, I think it was up about 100,000. It's pretty flat year over year. Baird, every new issue we have, they look at our existing schedule and they will set the new debt schedule to make sure that we have a nice flat overall debt service going into the future, so that we don't have these spikes.
So we're not going to repay any debt this year, is what you're saying?
Well, we have
Paying back
paying
debt, but
back
we're not
debt,
paying
always.
off debt or creating a debt reduction.
Not paying off more debt than what the schedule allows is what I guess.
Because
I'm saying.
the first year it was $500,000 across, but all the payments fluctuate a little bit. Every time they do this, it's kind of like creating a very layered sandwich. And sometimes you have thick mayo and sometimes you have thin, but they're trying to do it across the board looking out, because now all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but 10 years, the Lombardi Avenue debt falls off, and now all of a sudden you've lost that, but they've already created some other debt after that, knew that that was going to be paid off. So it absorbed that and made a higher debt payment in that year that debt was retired. And so that's why they're suggesting that paying off the debt doesn't make sense, because you're just taking off a very, very thin layer off of this sandwich, if you will. Does that help?
And the
But I
people
still
that-
struggle with that, because if you're looking at a homeowner, if he's got debt and has some extra money, he would pay down his debt to save himself money.
He
And
would,
like,
but it would be a
government is the-
one-time
doesn't
debt
work-
reduction.
Government doesn't work that way. You got to spend it,
No,
which doesn't make sense.
we reduce, say we paid off if something that was callable, now it's gone. And that debt is gone, but you would see a one-year blip. The next year, the other debt filled up the other existing, even if we didn't issue more debt, that debt structure was already designed to fill and level that off. So you'd have a 1 year, maybe a 5-cent reduction in your tax rate, and the next year, what the homeowner's going to remember is my taxes then went up 5 cents right after that, or 6 cents or 7 cents. And what we're trying to say is save the money, and instead of borrowing new debt, put it in your savings account so that you don't have to borrow for your new car or your new house. Pay cash for it next time. That's what we're trying to say.
Good to have.
I understand.
I'll make the motion to reserve 250,000 to the building fund, 240,000 to the retirement fund, and the balance to go into the future capital needs account. And do I have to use the word reserve?
Yes. Reserve for future capital needs.
To reserve for future capital needs.
Okay.
I'll
Yep.
second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Wonderful, thank you. Items for next agenda, anybody have anything? We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.